Alan Wilson and Baram Blackett have gone further than any other researchers in establishing the facts behind the legend. Since 1977, they have been re-evaluating the most ancient British texts. Some of their astonishing findings have been published, but it is only now that the full story can be told. Not only have they identified two Arthurs, but they've also found physical evidence to support their claims. Their research shows a long-crafted conspiracy to rewrite our history and deny our true heritage.
Caxton started printing in England, in London, in 1474, and the English Parliament immediately passed a law prohibiting printing in Wales. And you weren't allowed to print anything in Wales till 1692, 200 years later. And by then the damage was done. Ideas had been set in stone. Several times English kings and parliaments passed laws prohibiting the use of writing materials in Wales. And if you know that, it was against the law to actually own a pen or a piece of paper. It's lost in Wales because the education system was controlled by London. London in 1846 replaced every Welsh-speaking schoolteacher in Wales with an Englishman who couldn't speak Welsh. They did. They imported them by the hundred. They sacked every Welsh schoolteacher. So you had a monoglot population speaking Welsh, with about 10% of them being bilingual, speaking English. And you had every schoolteacher who spoke only English. I mean, the situation in the classrooms must have been absolutely diabolical.
And another thing you mentioned is that King Arthur was taught in Welsh schools up until 1926.
Yeah, King Arthur was taught as the king, son of King Maurice, and grandson of King Theodric, until about 1924, certainly. So I got one book. Chris Barber managed to get 3 old Welsh books. Then he took over the school system and it became anglicised, and out went King Arthur. And I had a school book of that era, King Theodric, King Maurice, King Arthur, you know. Oh, everybody knew.
The book that really brought Arthur to the attention of the world was The History of the Kings of Britain, written in 1135 by Geoffrey of Monmouth. Arthur's name had been recorded before, but it was this work that portrayed him as a knightly king, chivalrous in all his deeds.
Now, the problem immediately was that he proclaimed an Arthur who fought the Romans, and an Arthur who fought and defeated the Saxons and others. The immediate problem is that you have a 200 and maybe 25 or 250-year-old king. This was pointed out by Polydore Virgil, the historian for Henry VIII of the Six Wives, and said, look, this is impossible that you've got a 250-year-old king here. He can't fight the Romans and the Saxons. So what we're dealing with is two very real people. Arthur 1, right, about 340 to 400. Arthur 2, 503 to 579. And they've pushed the two together into one, made him a gigantic figure. This was immediately used to say all this history is false. So it's fairly obvious that he's two people.
Right.
And the man who fought the Saxons in the 6th century is a 6th generation direct descendant in the male line, and he is Arthur II. So you do have two kings, 200 years apart, both of them warrior kings. One fights the Romans, one fights the Saxons. There's a group of manuscripts known as the Brecon manuscripts. Again, these are always quoted by diligent people looking for Arthur. And in the Brecon manuscripts, I think it's the Harleian 4181. And again, I think it's the British Museum Vespasian A14. Again, you've got lists of the parentage and so on, ancestry of Brecon of Brecon. His mother was Marshall, who is a sister of King Maurice, so which makes Arthur and Brecon to be first cousins. And then it goes back, King Theodric, King Tithfelt, Theodosius, all the way back to Arthur I and Magnus Maximus. And in this way, we know more about our ancestors in Britain, and they are your ancestors. Just because kept in Wales doesn't mean a damn thing, right? They're all our ancestors, and we know more about them than any other country in Europe.
Their search now took them to Cardiff, and to the site of one of the oldest cathedrals in the country. With a mixture of the old and new, its windows clearly demonstrate its links with King Arthur of Glamorgan. Its ancient charters, republished by Allen and Baram in their book called The Charter of the Kings, established without doubt the dynasty of the Glamorgan kings. But what did these charters tell them?
They list the kings and they list the king's family, his brothers, his sons and some of his daughters and cousins and nephews and so on. Because these people are the nobility and they attend important land granting ceremonies with the church. On the church side you get the bishop, usually the 3 local abbots and their senior clergy. Now what is happening, as the charters go on down the centuries, a king dies and the bishop serves the next king, or the bishop dies and another one comes in, and they overlap each other. And so you can get a clear picture of who was who by linking them together in this overlapping fashion down the centuries. And you also see the sons coming in as witnesses and later becoming kings themselves and so on, witnessing these charters. And so it's possible to create a pretty extensive who was who for the entire period of around 400 to 1100.
Be it known to the clergy and people of southern Britain that Arthurius, king of the region of Gwent, granted to God and to St Duffrig and St Tylo, and in the hand of Bishop Comrig, the Church of Simvark.
Now from this one charter alone, and there are others, it's patently obvious that Arthur succeeded King Moiric as king. These charters and the lists of kings which can be extracted can then be compared with lives of the saints. All the saints were royal and noble people. You couldn't be a saint unless you were royal, you see. And obviously saints had mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters and so on, and saints also married. They didn't believe in celibacy like the Roman Church. And so you have the lives of the saints give you further linked genealogies, which link in with the land of charters.
One such saint is Tylo, who was a son of Marshall and a cousin of Arthur. His tomb is in Llandaff, as is St Duffrig's, the bishop who crowned Arthur. Though many have tried to dismiss these charters, these tombs are just one small piece of the jigsaw that demonstrate that these people were real.
Well, we take this exhibition a little further. We know that Magnus Maximus, who was Emperor of the West, 383 to 88, had 2 wives, Kaindrek, the mother of Arthur I, and descendants. Helen, daughter of Udaf, and descendants. All well known, all well publicised. So King Arthur, either Arthur I or Arthur II, are not isolated, unknown people, a wandering Goth, another leftover Roman. They are kings of a mighty dynasty. They've got ancestors, they've got descendants, they've got cousins and brothers and uncles and aunts and all sorts. And this is only a fraction of what we know and what's known to everybody else. So you've got Arthur I and his descendants coming down to Arthur II. Arthur I, Tathel, Taithfal, Tudrig, Moiric, Arthur II. A bringing together of the imperial lines of Britain. And so the idea that he's unknown is inconceivable. You either have done no research, no work whatsoever, and you know nothing at all to say that, or alternatively, you're simply not telling the truth.
Hal Dar, or Hal the Good. Around 920 AD, a king list was drawn up for the wedding of his son, Prince Owen. This document, called the Harleian 3859, still survives today in the British Museum.
The first real clue on this comes in the most famous of British manuscripts, is the Harleian 3859. And there are king lists, and list number 4 starts off with Mascin Wedig, who is Magnus Maximus.
It contains the names of both Arthurs.
383, the armies of the British invaded Gaul. The general of Magnus's armies was his son Arthur. The Latins called him Andragathius, and he defeated Gratian, the Emperor of Rome. He defeated Gratian in battle at Soissons, which they called the Battle of Sassy in Geoffrey of Monmouth, chased him to Lyons, Lugdunum, invited him to a meal and executed him. They defeat Gratian. Arthur chases Gratian down to Lyons and invites him to supper and kills him. So Magnus becomes Emperor of Rome and the West. And there's a mosaic in the Modena Cathedral, about 1100, showing the siege of Paris by Arthur and his men, and that is Arthur I. Crosses into the Balkans, and he's now confronted with the Emperor Theodosius of the East. And two big battles are fought, one at Sisica, on the Sisica River, the other at Poetovio. And Arthur, he's had the worst of it. He's outnumbered greatly, and he goes home, you see. The Romans were kicked out of Britain, by the way, in 322 by King Eudaf. They weren't in Britain. They were in and out of Britain like the bishop in the proverbial brothel. You know, this idea of 400 years of Roman rule has to be Mickey Mouse. It's a joke. It has no truth whatsoever. And you've also got the folktale of Guy of Warwick. Guy in Welsh is Gwir, means the man of Warwick, you see. And that again tells the exact story of Arthur I. And he has sons, and presumably daughters. They were finally defeated in the Balkans, two big battles in what is now, or was Yugoslavia. They're changing it now, aren't they?
Yes, Croatia and
a battle
Slovenia
on the Sisica River, Sisa, and a battle at Poetovio. And Arthur had to withdraw back, and a surprise move by Theodosius, the Emperor of Constantinople, captured Magnus at Ravenna. And
my namesake. So what was Arthur I's territory that he ruled?
His territory would have been the Midlands of England, Warwickshire and across there, Shropshire, maybe as far as Leicester, and North Wales, Powys, because there wasn't a Wales in England then, it was just Britain.
Yes, but they're not South Wales, because I believe there was some connection with Glamorgan.
Yeah, he had a brother who is buried in Lanhilleth, and that's in the Songs of the Graves, very clearly outlined. You go along and there's a great big grave mound right on target. He would have been titular over most places. They'd have all said, he's the boss, you know. So that's the way it would have worked. But there were kings in Wales, obviously.
Right.
Whereas the kingdom, it's not a principality, it's a kingdom. You've got to get that in your head. If you want to trace Arthur I, you look at William of Malmesbury and others, and they tell how he fortified the Lichfield area. And there are evidences of great fortifications in the general area. Arthur is said to be buried in the great ancient churchyard where multitudes of the illustrious of the British are buried. So you're looking for a great ancient churchyard with whacking big graves in it. Lots of them. And there is such a place where huge mounds and monumental tombs exist in large numbers. There's a place called Old Bury, the old burying place. And it's at Atherstone, Arthur's Twin, Arthur's grave mound in Warwickshire. And that's where you're going to find King Arthur, as mentioned by the medieval historians.
It was here that they made an amazing discovery.
And it was with the prod method of prodding that we found several things, but with this prod method, we hit a stone. There are letters on it. It appears to say something, but it means you have to sort of finish the words off. But it was the same as when we found other things. You know, what do we do with this? Because they're never going to believe it anyway.
The preserved words on the stone are in Latin. The first word is nearly complete, Artorius, or Arthur. Isit means cast down, and Masai could be part of his father's name, Maximus.
He died around 400, we think.
400, this is AD.
80, oh,
yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Arthur I has a son, Tathal, Theodore, right?
Yes.
He has a son, Teuthrin, Theodorus, yes. Right? Theodorus, right? He has a son, Teithfald, who is Theodosius, who became king, big king. He defeated the Saxons after a terrible massacre. Right. His son was Tudrig, Theodoric, who's buried at Mathen, has been twice excavated, the wound in his skull. His son is Moerig, which is Morris.
Yes.
And we know where he is. And his son is Arthur II. So 6 generations down the male line, we've got Arthur II.
Right.
In the Brutes of England, written between the 10th and 15th century, Arthur is clearly recorded.
Now, King Arthur is given quite a significant place in these histories. He gets quite a lot of space. And the coverage is, again, melding together, or welding together, King Arthur I and King Arthur II. Now, if we look at King Arthur II, we'll find there's a very interesting reference to him in the Brutes of England. And you've got to remember that up until modern times, this would have been generally firmly believed as authentic history. So in chapter 79, it's telling how King Arthur is over in France, Brittany area. And it's on about the Easter time. And it says, and when King Arthur had thus his knights feasted, so everybody in Britain, certainly England and Wales, would have been in no doubt whatsoever from the roots of England that King Arthur II, at least, was a king of Glamorgan and Gwent, certainly king of Glamorgan. There can be no doubt about this. It's a very clear statement.
From these genealogies, it's possible to place Arthur into the 6th century.
One prominent means of dating is Arthur had a sister named Anna, and Anna had a son named Samson. Samson of Dol, as he was known, actually moved over to Brittany. Dol is over there. He attended and signed the papers of the Second Council of Paris in 556. So if Samson is signing the papers as a fairly young cleric, actually, in 556, King Arthur is his uncle, his mother's brother, has got to be of the same era.